Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Rose Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. The 2023 college football season is rapidly approaching, and as the season gets closer and closer, I'm going to start doing team previews and record predictions for as many teams as I possibly can in college football before the season begins. Today, our first team we're going to be looking at is the Indiana Hoosiers, and they're a really interesting team to try to predict their record on because they've got an entirely new team, it seems, on paper. They do have some guys coming back from last year's team, but a lot of players that are going to be playing key roles on this year's team are transfers, and it's going to be really interesting to see how Tom Allen can mesh all this talent together because of the fact Tom Allen's on the hot seat. He has a lot of pressure on him right now. Is he in any danger of getting fired after this season? Maybe not, because he does have a $20 million buyout, so that's going to help out Tom Allen for potentially getting fired, and he is beloved by a lot of Hoosier Nation and a lot of college football fans in general because he's such a likable guy, a likable coach, and a lot of his players really respect him as well. So Tom Allen, he's got a lot going for him, but he really needs to have success this year, and be able to make a bowl game would be huge for the Hoosiers. But that's going to be really tough with the schedule that they have, and we're going to get into that really soon. But looking at the Hoosiers under Tom Allen, they started out 5-7 and 5-7, and then they had two great seasons going 8-5 and 6-2, but then it started to trail down the past 2 years going 2-10 and 4-8 last year. Can Indiana improve? They've got the talent on the roster, I think, to get it done. Because looking at the quarterback position, last year they had Connor Bazelak and Jack Tuttle at quarterback. Both of them are gone. They both transferred out. And Dexter Williams, who played some this past season for Indiana. Dexter Williams unfortunately suffered a gruesome injury at the end of the regular season last year against Purdue. That was a horrible injury, and he might be back before the end of this regular season, but he's not going to be available at the start of the 2023 football season. So that's tough for Indiana, but they do have two players that could be viable candidates for the starting job. Tennessee transfer, which you're going to get used to hearing that. Indiana's got a lot of transfers. Besides Colorado, Indiana probably has more transfers than any other team in college football this year. But Tayven Jackson, a name that rings a bell for Hoosier fans, the brother of Trace Jackson Davis, he's transferred from Tennessee. He's coming to the Hoosiers. He has no college football experience. Harley's a redshirt freshman, and he only threw 4 passes for the Tennessee Volunteers last year. And he is a guy that can run the football as well, which is something that Tom Allen really wants to prioritize. With Indiana's offensive line struggles to have a quarterback that can run the football, and Tayven Jackson can do that, even though he definitely is a guy that throws the football more. He could be the starting quarterback. You also have Brendan Sorsby as well. He was a high school recruit out of Texas, a 3-star prospect. Tayven Jackson was a 4-star prospect, but sometimes recruiting rankings don't always matter. I think Brendan Sorsby, he's got the dual threat ability as well. He played a little bit in the Penn State game last year for Indiana, had a lot of struggles, but it's hard to expect a guy like that as a true freshman to play against Penn State and have a lot of success. But it's going to be interesting to see who it's going to be. I think between the two, it's going to be really close who will be the Hoosiers quarterback while Dexter Williams is still trying to recover. We'll have to see if he'll eventually be able to start again for Indiana this next season, halfway through the year. But I do think on opening day against Ohio State in week 1, I think Tayven Jackson will be the starting quarterback for Indiana. It's going to be a close competition, a close battle, and I think either way you go, Indiana is going to possibly have an upgrade at the quarterback position compared to what they've had previously the last couple years with an injured Michael Penix and then Connor Bazelak, who just could not run the football. I think Tayven Jackson has the upside to be a solid quarterback for Indiana and an improvement for the Hoosiers. Looking at the running back position, Indiana has 3 viable candidates that will probably get a lot of snaps for Indiana this year. Jalen Lucas, he's a guy that's 5'9", 170 pounds, but he can run the football. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He is fantastic. He has speed, and he led the nation last year with 2 kick returns for touchdown, which is an insane stat, and he also had the most all-purpose yards for an Indiana player since Whop Phillier, and that was as a true freshman. So I think Jalen Lucas is going to take a massive step forward this year, and he's probably one of the most dangerous players on the Indiana roster that defenses are going to have to pay attention to. But Indiana also has Josh Henderson, who was a former North Carolina transfer. He played last year for Indiana. He had over 500 all-purpose yards as well. And then they've got Christian Turner, a Wake Forest transfer, who had over 500 yards rushing for the Demon Deacons this past year. So Indiana has 3 solid running backs that I think will play a lot of snaps for Indiana and should give them one of the best running back rooms that they've had in the last 5 years. At wide receiver, they've got a ton of options. Donovan McCulley, who used to be a quarterback for Indiana, he's going to be at receiver because he converted over there this past year and he had some success. Wide receiver Cam Camper, who was a junior college transfer, he was great for Indiana this past season, but then he tore his ACL in the Rutgers game. That really set Indiana back. back in the receiving room, but I think Cam Camper, as long as he's healthy, he should definitely be the leading receiver for Indiana this next season, unless somebody like DeKeese Carter, who is the Fordham transfer this season, he's going to be really solid for Indiana. He had over 2,000 receiving yards at Fordham. I know that's at the FCS level, but I really feel like DeKeese Carter could have a lot of success for Indiana in this offense. You also have Anderson Kobe, who was a former Tennessee transfer. He's a really solid player as well. E.J. Williams, a former 5-star recruit, one of the only 5-star recruits to ever set foot on the Indiana campus. He's a Clemson transfer. He was really solid for Clemson as a freshman, and his career kind of took a nosedive, but I feel like E.J. Williams could have some success with Indiana. So the Hoosiers do have a lot of weapons in the receiving core, and you can tell that the talent has been upgraded. It's just whether it can all mesh together for Indiana, and if Tom Allen and Walt Bell, the offensive coordinator, can get all of this to work. Because if they can, Indiana could actually be really solid. They've got good receivers. They've got good running backs. And they've got a potentially talented quarterback in Tayven Jackson if he's just able to have a shot. The big key, though, for Indiana is the offensive line. You look at the offensive line, they've had severe struggles the last few years, but finally Tom Allen fired Darren Hiller, the old offensive line coach, and they brought in Wisconsin offensive line coach Bob Bostad, so that could really help out the offensive line. Names like Khalil Benson, Mike Caddick, Zach Carpenter, Matthew Bedford, Josh Sells, and others, and they also have 2 transfers in Noah Boltikoff from TCU and Max Longman from UMass, both new to the team. All these guys, if they can just take small steps forward for the Hoosiers and be able to improve as an offensive line, and the unit can just progress in the right direction, that will give Indiana's quarterback time to throw the ball, and it would allow the Hoosiers to finally go a whole season without an injured quarterback, something they have had for the last 4 years. Now, looking at the defensive side of the ball, Indiana has a lot of new faces there as well. Guys like Tywan Mullen, Cam Jones, they are gone. Program stalwarts, but now they've got in guys like Andre Carter. He's a defensive lineman for Western Michigan. I think he's a guy that could definitely be a potential all-Big Ten player this season. He was fantastic in the MAC last year, and he wants a chance to prove he can succeed at the Power 5 level. He's a redshirt senior as well, a really big body, 6'5", 270 pounds. I think he will be a great player for Indiana. They've also got Patrick Lucas and Ladarius Cox back, both of the Ole Miss transfers from 2 years ago. They've also brought in on the defensive line Philip Bleedy and Marcus Burris from Texas Tech and Texas A&M respectively. Indiana's beefed up the defensive line, and this could actually be one of the most formidable defensive lines that Indiana has had in a few seasons. Miles Jackson and Linnell Carr are outside linebackers from UCLA and West Virginia respectively. Through the transfer portal, Indiana's definitely used the portal to be able to improve their team potentially for this next season. At middle linebacker, you've got Jared Casey, the Kentucky transfer, and Jacob Mangum-Farrar, the Stanford transfer. So both those players were not originally on Indiana's roster. Jared Casey did play for Indiana this past year, but Jacob Mangum-Farrar is new, but I think both those guys could be solid in the middle linebacker spot. Aaron Casey is a guy at outside linebacker that has been with Indiana the whole entire time. His experience will definitely be huge for Indiana. He has some of the most experience of any player on this defense, and he's definitely going to have to lead the Hoosiers next year. I think he definitely could be an all-Big Ten player, and he's going to have to if Indiana is going to have success on defense. Joshua Rudolph's an Austin Peay transfer outside linebacker. He was really talented at the FCS level. And then at the corner and safety spots, you've got Jameer Johnson, the Texas transfer. Safety Josh Sanguinetti, who has been an Indiana Hoosier the entire time. Cornerback Nicholas Toomer from Stanford, and safety/Husky position Noah Pierre. Noah Pierre is a guy I think that can take another leap forward for Indiana. He's a really solid player. But the biggest issue for Indiana is, despite all this talent, all of these players are new. They're all transfer portal players for the most part. Indiana barely has any returning guys on defense. They do have a few more on offense, specifically the offensive line spot, but Indiana definitely is going to have to find a way to be able to build a roster where they're going to be able to keep guys and prevent them from leaving through the transfer portal, and they have to hope that these players do improve, or otherwise Indiana could have another long season. But the talent is there for Indiana to make a bowl game. It's just going to be whether Tom Allen, Walt Bell, Bob Bostad, and all the other coaches on the defensive side of the ball as well can mesh all this talent together and get it to work. But the other issue for Indiana is always the schedule, and this is the last year of the current format in the Big Ten, of the Big Ten East and the Big Ten West. The East has always been a bane for the Hoosiers because they have to play Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan every single season. No longer will that be the case when 2024 comes and USC and UCLA arrive and the Big Ten eliminated division. So that will help out the Hoosiers. But for 2023 purposes, Indiana's still in the Big Ten East, and you would assume that those 3 games are going to be losses, unfortunately, for Indiana. Anything can happen in football, you never know, but Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan are definitely out of Indiana's league. Michigan State's a team that's beaten Indiana for the most part the past few years, but Indiana did beat Michigan State this past season, so you never know. They could do it again, and it's at home. Indiana also has to play at Purdue like they do every year. That's going to be a tough game, but it's possible as well. The only 2 guarantees guaranteed wins for Indiana, you would think, are Indiana State and Akron at home. The toss-up games are Louisville at home, at Maryland, versus Rutgers, versus Wisconsin, at Illinois, Michigan State, and at Purdue. Now, if you chalk up the 3 losses of Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, and you chalk up the 2 wins for Indiana State and Akron, the other 7 games are potentially wins or losses for Indiana. Now, looking at that schedule, I could see the Hoosiers going 7-5. I think that's their ceiling. I think that's the best they could do with this roster. 3-9 is the floor if the bottom falls out, Indiana's offensive line doesn't improve, Tayven Jackson gets hurt or something like that, and everything just falls off the rails. But I do think that Indiana will split the difference. This is a tough schedule, and I do feel like the Hoosiers could make a bowl game, but my record prediction for the Indiana Hoosiers in 2023 is 5-7. That's not too bad. That's going to be enough potentially for Tom Allen not to get fired. I think he's going to be given another year if he does go 5-7, because at least there will be some improvement from the 4-8 season last year, and potentially with the 2024 schedule being easier, and Indiana can keep most of these guys that they've added through the portal, then maybe Indiana could be better the next season after that. But 5-7 is my record prediction for the Hoosiers. Hopefully for Tom Allen and Indiana, they have a lot of success in 2023, but that's going to be a really tough schedule for Indiana as always, and with all these new transfer portal additions, the uncertainty is there, and just how well all this talent's going to mesh together. It's going to be really interesting. Indiana did a great job. They've got a really solid recruiting class with the portal guys. They're actually top 25 in talent brought in through the transfer portal. So again, the potential is there to have a lot more success than a 5-7 year, but I do think with the tough schedule and just so much uncertainty around with all these new additions, I do have the Hoosiers going 5-7 as my record prediction for 2023. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below your thoughts about this 2023 Indiana football team, all the new additions that the Hoosiers have brought in, and whether you think Tom Allen can mesh this roster together and be able to have more success in a 5-7 season, and what record you guys think that the Indiana Hoosiers will achieve in 2023. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.